Hi, I'm Andy from BeCleverWithYourCash.com. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the first of my This Week rundowns where me and a guest look at the top money stories from the last 7 days. Hope you find it useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But let's kick off this episode starting from the 8th of January 2021. Faith, thank you so much for coming back onto Cash Chats for this new kind of way of looking at things. And the idea is we're going to just look back at the big stories from the week, the big financial news. Where should we kick off? I guess there's only one place to start off, really, isn't it? And it's lockdown 3. Is it lockdown 3? Technically, I suppose it's the third big lockdown, isn't it?
Yep, here we are again.
To be fair, I must say it doesn't really feel that much different to me. I mean, we were on tier 2 just a week ago. I mean, we went tier 2, then tier 3, then to this very, very quickly. But I know for lots of people, the big change for this one compared to the one we had in the autumn is something that you're feeling very, it's very fresh in the mind, isn't it? It's the homeschooling.
Yes, I think for me, the massive difference with the last lockdown was the kids could still go to school, and that meant they were much happier. They were getting the regular education, and my husband and I could still work from home. So now it's that flashback PTSD to last year with the schools shut, trying to get the kids to do whatever they're meant to be doing for their schools while also juggling work. And that is not an easy situation to be in. And I speak as somebody who is self-employed, so I have more flexibility to work round their education, but my heart goes out. I mean, I think this is an issue that disproportionately affects women.
Yeah.
I think it's been shown in the last lockdown. 1 in 6 women had to, reduce their hours or even leave their jobs in order to cope when their children couldn't go to school. If you think of single mothers, because 9 in 10 single parents are mothers,
Yeah.
they have nobody to share the childcare with, and suddenly you're trying to juggle your job with your looking after your kids, with schooling your kids, supervising their education, and that's if you have the kind of job that you can do from home.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big difference, isn't it? From this time when the kids being at home and homeschooling to when we had it in the spring in 2020, is that the furlough rules have changed. So before it was very much you were furloughed or you weren't furloughed. Yeah. And then when it was adapted, obviously that you can be furloughed part-time now. So that could be something which parents could talk to their employers about, maybe seeing if they can have a day or 2 furloughed, split it between them, and hopefully make it a little bit easier so they aren't doing that juggling.
It's true, but bearing in mind that furlough pay might only be 80% of your current pay. Yeah. So, between the devil and the deep blue sea, if money is tight anyway.
Yeah. I mean, also, it's not just as... So I think that the biggest thing, isn't it, for parents right now, this lockdown is managing that. But there are extra costs that are coming in with this as well. Because the children now, they've kind of got a bit... The teachers, I think, have got a bit more aware of how they're going to do this. And essentially, the kids have to have access to their own computer to do this properly. And I mean, how many households are going to have a separate device, a separate computer that's going to be enough for people to use for everyone in the house? So if mum and dad are both working from home, 2 or 3 kids, I mean, that's 5 computers you've got to have. If you haven't got that, well, yes, there's the option to go into school now, but you might find yourself having to shell out and get some extra equipment.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And extra equipment has been promised for families in the most need, but I think there's a lot of head teachers flagging up they haven't had as many devices provided, and if they can't give the devices to the families to use in the homes, and then you're ending up with more children in the schools, and that then starts to defeat the reason for lockdown. Yeah. If you're getting a much higher school population, it is a bad situation.
Now, we haven't actually heard much from the Chancellor about any sort of financial measures for this new lockdown. They said that we know the budget is coming up on the 3rd of March, which is quite a way away. So, I mean, whether we'll see some earlier announcements before that. But really, all that's been announced have been some additional grants, haven't they, for businesses?
Yeah. And I mean, in some ways, that's good, because it sounds like some of the grants announced are going to go to on a more local level and could potentially benefit some of the people who were excluded from the self-employment income support scheme.
Yeah.
who are some of the people that have no financial support at all. No option for furlough, no option to SEISS grants. So perhaps some money can get to them, the people who are just surviving on universal credit if their income has dried up.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing. The excluded UK group, the people who haven't got anything at all this time, surely something we've got to have something to help some of these people more than just these grants, because that's not going to cover everyone. Surely
Yeah.
this time there's got to be something announced for some of those people, because we're looking at 12 months of potentially no income for a lot of people. But I guess that stuff we'll wait and see. We've had it all year as well. The other sort of knock on this other lockdown on the bigger businesses are some of those big brands that we actually do like, the ones we do love, struggling. And Paper Chase is the latest one that's kind of on the brink of administration, which I'm not saying I'm a regular shopper there, but it's somewhere I actually normally pop in just after Christmas to pick up their sales offers, or discounting nice cards, but they're cut price. It
That's
might
so
be that,
true.
yeah.
My Christmas cards this year were paper chase bought in January.
Well, that might, sadly, we might not be able to do that anymore. I mean, it hasn't happened yet. They're only on, say, the headline, the brink of administration, and they're looking at what they're going to do. But things don't look good for them. Harvester has said it's going to need more cash to survive as well. I'm not somewhere that I regularly frequent, but it's just an indication that so many places, are already struggling high street before this. It's just continuing to get worse, and it's not the end of it, is it? We're going to see more, aren't we?
I think we will. I think the trouble is that coronavirus has accelerated structural trends. We were already seeing a movement for retail from the high street moving online. We were already seeing a movement to home working, and the pandemic has sped up that process. So, as you say, perhaps retailers, traditional bricks and mortar retailers that were struggling before, coronavirus has only made things worse. And then I think unless you're a very strong brand with a very strong online presence already, very tough times.
I'm doing to avoid Amazon for the entire year. Before this lockdown even happened, I decided 2021 I'm not going to spend any money with Amazon. So we'll see how that goes. But
Okay.
particularly, I think during the lockdown periods, lots of people think, right, I'll just go to Amazon. But I would encourage people just to think what they can do. See if those local businesses are doing click and collect. That was something that was introduced back in November. So if they haven't got a web presence, you might be able to just phone them up and say, look, have you got this? You know what? Yeah, it will cost you a little bit more on the whole most of the time than getting it from someone like Amazon. But if you don't, Amazon will keep getting bigger, and these shops will just follow on from the others that have disappeared, which is
Yeah,
it's very, very sad, I think. So one
that's
of the
very
things you
true.
wanted to chat about was housing, because that's obviously some stuff off the back of other measures that were introduced earlier in 2020 to try and help the housing market. What's the latest there?
Well, we're talking about things that have been going wrong for other businesses. The housing market has gone off like a rocket. It's completely the other extreme. We've seen house prices soaring. We've seen mortgage applications hitting record levels. It's just going crazy. And
Yeah.
it has mainly been triggered, partly pent up demand from the last lockdown when people couldn't buy houses, the housing market was just stopped. But more relevantly, the Chancellor announcing the stamp duty holiday, which is due to end at the end of March. Who knows whether it might get extended, but currently due to end of March. And so there are so many people stampeding to complete transactions and make those stamp duty savings. And it has pushed up prices, and it has slowed down some of the processes, because
Yeah.
let's face it, if you get a huge volume going through at a time when the banks and building societies, the mortgage lenders have a lot of staff on furlough, people working remotely, surveyors not necessarily going out, so it's kind of slowed down the process. And also some of the banks and building societies have really tightened their lending criteria, because they are concerned what's going to happen further down the road. Things may be looking quite rosy for the housing market right now, but if, as the Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts, we're going to see peak unemployment this summer, that could lead to problems for many people repaying their mortgages.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder whether this is something we'll hear about before the budget on March the 3rd, because if they are going to extend it, you kind of want to give a little bit more notice than just that time. It would give that until the actual stamp duty goes back to its normal levels. And if they are going to extend it, I mean, is that a good thing necessarily? It will keep this sort of bubble going potentially. But it's still not going to change, as you say, what happens when that finishes and prices potentially sort of fall all the way back down. Like you say, that money that you're saved by getting this stamp duty holiday, you're probably paying for it anyway by overpaying for the price, and you'll lose that again. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
My concern, especially if the stamp duty deadline doesn't change, is for anybody who, if you're not already in a chain, if you haven't already started this process, it may be very hard to complete before the end of March. So if your bank, the maximum stamp duty saving you can make if you buy the more expensive houses is £15,000. And if you start the process now, banking on that saving, and you spend out on lawyers' fees, solicitors' fees, searches, surveys, you could be in a position where you've spent all that money, potentially miss the deadline so you don't make this saving. And if your chain collapses because other people have to pull out, perhaps because they're not making the saving or their jobs have changes, you could not only miss out on the saving, but have a lot of extra expenditure as well. So I'd say to anybody who hasn't yet started the process of trying to buy, trying to sell, be really wary.
Yeah, I mean, it's one to keep an eye on, and we'll update on this on the podcast when we know more what's happening with that. There has been some good news, though, in the world of home ownership that's just come out around leaseholds. Leaseholds have been, I mean, they're a real nightmare in lots of ways when they're getting close to the end, aren't they? And today they've sort of said, well, actually, we're hoping to change that.
Yes, it really is good news. I mean, the deal with leasehold, you might think if you buy a property rather than renting, that's it. It's your castle. However, if you buy it on a leasehold basis, you will still have to deal with other people. There will be somebody you won't own your house for the rest of time. It'll just be for a certain amount of time on the lease. And you also may be liable for ground rent. And we've seen people really taking advantage, putting in the small print about ground rent increases, and also there is legislation so you can try and buy the leasehold of your property, but we've seen people really hike up the prices charged if you want to buy the leasehold and become a freeholder, or if you want to extend your lease. So it is good news that there is going to be legislation coming along that will stop some of these price hikes.
Yeah, they're hoping to get it in this parliament, they're saying, in the next parliament. So that would be absolutely fantastic. And I think it's going to be 990 years that you can extend your leasehold to at any time. And that's basically, I mean, it just means that you don't have to wait until that last, 30 or 50 years, depending if it's a flat or a house, to do that and then be potentially just stuck with this thing, which makes it so much more difficult to sell. Yeah. Let alone the whole ground rent issue where people taking advantage there, particularly I think with new builds has been an issue. So that's some really good news. Now, I can't believe we are kind of more than halfway through this and we haven't even talked about Brexit. The COVID stuff has kind of dominated so far. But Brexit obviously happened a week ago. We're recording this on the Thursday. The deal was in place and things seem to be going relatively smoothly. There's been a few bits and pieces of the Northern Irish border and things, but generally it's okay for now. We obviously won't know the real effects of everything for a long time because COVID's just messing it up. But one thing we do know about now, and a money saving expert reported on that this week, is the replacement for the EHIC, the European Health Insurance Card. There is a new version of this called the GHIC. What's it stand for? Global,
which is entertaining given that the global version covers fewer countries than the European version did. But there we are. There is going to be a replacement, so that's good. The advantage of an EHIC and a new GHIC was that if you were traveling in the relevant countries and you had one of the cards, you were entitled to the same state healthcare that a local person would. So you might be able to use state hospitals, state doctors, entitled to the same reimbursement for medicines.
Yeah.
So that's good. Not a replacement for travel insurance.
No.
Never rely on an EHIC for that because, for example, if you needed to be repatriated, flown back after an injury, and if you didn't have travel insurance, you'd be paying for that out of your own pocket, and it is not cheap. No. But good news, there'll be a replacement. Good news as well, that current EHIC card, if you already got an EHIC, it will carry on lasting until the expiry date shown on your bit of plastic.
Yeah, which is great. And if not, if you haven't got one, and it's not happening right now, it's not going to be happening for a while yet, but if you are going to go to Europe, to those countries which are covered, and it is most of
Holidays.
the countries. It's not as many countries, but it is most of the countries. Get
I think
this GHIC.
it's it's all the European. It's like the 27 European ones, but it's not the added extras you used to get
Yeah,
with the EHIC. The kind
yeah.
of
Was it like
Norway,
Switzerland and
Switzerland,
Norway or something,
Liechtenstein,
isn't it?
Iceland, and some overseas territories. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So let's get that. The important thing here, and we always said it before with the EHIC as well, there are always, well, there were always with EHIC, loads of scammer websites trying to get you to pay for this. And if they haven't already, they'll be replacing them, updating them to trying to get you to pay for the GHIC. You don't have to pay for it. There is an official site that you can go through to make sure that you do that. I think it's through the NHS Direct, isn't it, that you can find it.
yeah, EHIC
Don't
is
pay for this.
free. GHIC is free. Don't pay.
And you also need it, even if you have insurance. Just mention that as well, because sometimes the insurance won't pay out if you haven't had the card that gives you the coverage, the medical care at the state rate, because otherwise it could be a lot more money and they won't pay for that. So that's our Brexit coverage for this week. Something I wanted to talk about.
In the dream when you're traveling abroad again, when you're actually leaving your home and going on holiday abroad, then you will need one.
Something I want to talk about were price hikes. We've had a couple that have been confirmed or announced this week. One of them kind of knew about for a while, which was Netflix. So that's bringing up prices on some of its subscription services. But the other one, the sort of the bigger one, which probably cost people a lot more money potentially, is Virgin Media. There's going to be an average 4% increase from the 1st of March. So depending what you've got, what things you've signed up for, that could you see between 30 and £54 increase over the year. It's just the start, isn't it? We normally get these price hikes around, late winter, early spring. I think this is just the start of it.
Yeah, and there's been such an explosion in different subscriptions and different streaming services. I think it's one of the things. New Year is a great time of year to actually review your regular payments. Actually look what is going out: direct debit, standing order, recurring payments, because it's so easy, isn't it, to sign up for trial subscriptions, and you might suddenly look down and you think, oh, I've got Sky or Virgin. Oh, there's the Amazon Prime, because I use, for the people who are still using Amazon, Netflix. If you've got Disney Plus subscription, maybe
so
you've
many.
decided you like BritBox. It's just exploded out of all recognition. So you may be using them more in lockdown than you did before, but have a look and see whether you need quite so many.
Yeah, absolutely. And those ones are kind of easy to get out of generally because they're monthly, they're month by month. So you do that at audit and you get rid of them. It's the bigger stuff. It's the Virgin Media. I'm sure we'll see the same happening very soon from the mobile phone companies, the other broadband companies, the other pay TV, where you're locked in generally for 12 to 18 months, if not 2 years. So those price increases, often you can't get out of it. Now, the interesting thing about with this Virgin Media increase is that if you are in contract, you are able to leave this one within 30 days of being notified. You can say, look, I don't want to pay this anymore. You give your notice. So you could even just be sort of 6 months into a contract. You can get out of it to avoid the price increase. That's something which won't necessarily be possible with a lot of the increases we expect to see later this year, because they added extra terms into their contracts that said we will increase it by X amount over the rate of inflation or whatever it might be. So that's something good news if you're a Virgin Media customer and you don't want to keep paying this. But later on, this might be one of the last chances we get to really escape those kind of price hikes. I would say that something I always used to do is use this as an opportunity to phone them up and get your price down. So although it's a price hike, the fact that you can leave, if you threaten to leave, you say, look, be very nice about it, but you phone them up and you say, look, it's too expensive for me. I'd like to go. They will generally try and pass you on to someone in the team who will offer you a better deal. And I've even done it in the past with Virgin Media where I've said, look, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to leave. I'm going to move to somebody else. The next day they phoned me back and came back with an even better offer to get me to stay. So Virgin Media customers, bad news about the price increase, but potentially good news if you can use it to bring down, bizarrely, the price of your bill. A couple more stories worth talking about. Did you see the one about executive pay?
What the crazy figures about how the most highly paid people have already earned by Wednesday of this year more than most of their employers will earn for the whole of the rest of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Shocking.
The top bosses here in the UK are paid 115 times more than their average worker. And I think Ocado came out as one of the worst ones there. But there's some of the fat cats, by Wednesday of this year. So that was the 6th, wasn't it? 6th of January. Bear in mind, we had a weekend and a bank holiday, I think, in that mix. So they basically worked a couple of days, 3 days, 4 days max, maybe. And that's more than the average salary for the year. It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Do you think we're in the wrong job?
Well, I don't know if you remember this last year. Was it? No, it wasn't even last year. It was more than a year ago now. It was during the run-up to the general election. And there was this big thing about the increasing, I think it was a Labour policy about increasing tax on the richest, I want to say 3% of the population. And it turned out that the richest 3% are earning, I think it's a household rather than individuals, but it's something like 80k or might even be less than that. It's a lot less than you would think in that top percentage. So when you then factor in these top people, it's a minutiae. It's a fraction of a percent of terms of compared to the rest of the country. It really is shocking. That inequality, I think, is something which has become even more stark this year with so many people, like we started off talking about, people being put on furlough at 80% of their wages or potentially losing their jobs. It's got to be addressed. Whether we'll see something around that in the budget in terms of taxation, whether they'll sort of take this as an opportunity to tax the richer people who have potentially got more money to come back to rather than do it in an even swoop. Who knows? It's all up for grabs. You wouldn't expect it from a Tory government, but it's a very different scenario.
Well, fundamentally, there has been billions and billions and billions of pounds spent on propping up the economy, propping up companies, propping up individuals during the pandemic, and that money has to be paid back somehow.
Yeah.
And so certainly originally the budget penciled in for March, I think, was meant to be making some of the announcements about spending changes, tax increases, to start chipping away at that mountain of debt. In practice, I wonder whether Rishi Sunak's actually going to be able to do that. With this latest lockdown coming so close to that budget, I wonder if it's going to be yet another firefighting budget, just trying to cope with today's troubles rather than looking ahead at how it's going to be paid back.
Now, one last story to talk about, and this is something that you and I, personal finance journalists, there are certain stories that we know are going to come every single year that aren't all really stories. They're kind of, like Blue Monday, which is at some point in January was created by the travel industry. And all these things that pop up that, it's made up stuff. There's a semblance of truth in there somewhere, but really it's just a kind of, hey, let's create something around it to get some press coverage. And another one of those is Divorce Day, which this year apparently fell on January the 4th, which was, when was that? Was that Monday or Tuesday? A few days ago.
I think it would be Monday. It's the first working day of the new year. And traditionally, after families have been, extended families all cooped up together over Christmas and New Year, and that's when people finally crack and say, you know what, I'm calling the solicitor as soon as offices reopen. You know what? I do wonder whether it would be the same this year. Because the one thing that lockdown did, as somebody who got put into tier 4 just before Christmas, after having bought the turkey, maybe with Christmases being so much smaller, they'd have been actually less pressured. Maybe we won't see so many divorces.
And we've spent nearly a year now, at home for the bulk of the time, just with our spouses. So it's going to go one of two ways.
Would you have broken before?
It could be that it's not waiting for that kind of post-Christmas break. It's waiting for all the lockdown to finish. So there could well be. I think that's the truth, in that people, when they spend a lot of time together, when they're not used to spending time together, can sometimes push people to make that, move to petition to divorce, which is where this comes from. But the idea that this Divorce Day in January this year is still trying to push it, I think it's taking it too far. I saw this is Retail Gazette, I saw this reported in. I'm sure it would be other places as well. But the Poundland announced on Divorce Day set to launch a new divorce range. The range includes party items for when lockdown and social distancing rules allow get-togethers again. And it's kind of, what does it include? Balloons, banners, sashes, party straws, but also bodysuits, boxer shorts, love eggs, and vibrators. So that's how...
Catering to all needs.
So to celebrate your divorce, you can do all of those things thanks to Poundland.
Very forward thinking. I wonder whether they're looking ahead to later this year, because the rule changes should come in the autumn that allow so-called quickie divorces.
Yeah.
That is, it's actually a very sensible thing. It's about no fault divorces, so you don't need to accuse
Yeah.
the other party of adultery or whatever else, unreasonable behaviour. So it's just going to be no fault divorce from the autumn, with the idea that a lot more divorces can be concluded in 6 months or less. So I think on the whole that is a good move, but I just would flag up that if you are leaving a marriage, a civil partnership, it's really important to sort the finances out. Some figures that I saw recently were that only 13% of divorce settlements consider pension assets. And I know a lot of people yawn when they hear about pensions. If you're getting divorced and you're not retired, that probably isn't the first thing on your mind. But a pension pot can be worth more than the family home.
Yeah.
It can be a really significant asset. And so at the point you do retire, that is so relevant if you haven't taken account of the pension assets at the point when you get that divorce.
Particularly as well, if you're talking about the woman in the relationship, in the divorce, if they've had kids, there's a good chance they would have spent less time in the workplace putting towards their pension. And obviously we know that there's still the gender pay gap there. So it's probably more important for, if you are a woman and you're considering a divorce, to make sure you know exactly what's in your soon to be divorced husband's pension packet, because you're getting more out of it than letting him just sort of keep it. Can go both ways. It's not obviously a general rule, but particularly one for, I think, for women to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think that was a good little roundup of a lot of the stories. I mean, there was so much more we could have talked about, but I think that's kind of given us a good cross section of things so people understand some of the top stories. Thank you so much. What's the best place if people want to find you online to go?
My blog, Much More With Less, is at muchmorewithless.co.uk. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at muchmore_less, which I think is on the screen. And also I do have the Much More With Less Money Saving Year Facebook group, if people want to join that to share ideas and support and inspiration.
Wonderful. Thanks, Faith.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do hit the like button at the bottom of this and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, not just of this weekly news roundup, but all the other videos I produce every single week. Until next time, cheers. And here are a couple more videos you might find interesting.